Hey, what's up? Today, Hera released a video about the top 5 best civs for new players to pick up to get into the game and to rise on the ranking. That inspired me to cook up a little bit something on my own and do the inverse, the worst civs for beginner players. Talk a little bit about why those civs are on the bottom and why they are so hard. As a fairly close to average player myself, I could probably just have used my own experience and created my own lists out of thin air, but I'll make it a little more objective. There is a very useful site at aoestats.io that will give performance for civs, and it can even filter for different elo ranges. So what I will do here is look at the bottom 5 civs for the 850 to 1000 elo range, present them in descending order, and talk a little bit about why I think they are on the bottom of the list. Some of them are fairly obvious, but at least one might be surprising. With that, let's hop right into it. Number 41, Poles. I think this is a classic case of people being blinded by the most flashy bonuses of the civ and leaning too hard into them. The Poles are really not bad. They have a great bonus in their Stone Miners Also Mine Gold bonus, which I think is really valuable on a lower level where castle drops can be absolutely lethal because people don't know how to handle them. But instead of something simple like a scout rush into a fairly quick castle where you're already sitting on 400 to 500 stone, then just mine a little bit more in Castle Age and go forward with the castle and end the game, people try to force a massive farm eco, try to get the Schlachter privileges, and maybe even Winged Hussar, and it's just taking too long before anything really gets going militarily, and you get overwhelmed by civs with a quicker standard build. Also, the fact that once you get Schlachter privileges, you really want to spam the heavy cavalry, but then you reach Imperial Age and your Cavalier doesn't even get the last armor, and you're forced into either playing with a suboptimal unit or make some sort of transition, probably also does not lend itself very well to beginner play. Number 42, the Byzantines. Interestingly, this one ended up as an honorable mention on Hera's list over the best civs for beginners. He did put in a caveat there though, that they can be complicated if you're not comfortable with the counterplay that the Byzantines so much excel at. And I think that is the case for a lot of newer players. To base your strategy on counterplay is not easy. Then you have to be on top of the situation all the time, be really strong at scouting so that you know what's coming. Playing with counter units usually means playing defensive, and it only takes one mistake to be in a world of hurt when you play on the defense, because you're playing so close to your own economy. If you're offensive, then you can always lose an army or two, and as long as you produce more at home and have a new army, it doesn't really matter that much. Of course, you can be offensive with Byzantine armies, play like an MBL and send skirms and spears into the enemy base like little ants, but that's not the strategy that comes to mind when you read in the Civ overview that you have a defensive civilization. Also, no eco bonuses doesn't really help. Number 43, Burmese. I think we all know what's going on here. The skirms with no armor makes the game so hard to play if you're up against archers. The Burmese are great economically. The free lumber upgrades is a great bonus, but it is probably more valuable the better you are as a player. I'm probably not quoting correctly here, but I think it was Survivalist I heard say once that the best gauge of the skill of a player, if you don't have access to the person's elo score, is how much wood that person floats. The less wood float, the better the player. And if you're floating wood anyway, because you're a 900 player, then free lumber upgrades probably isn't that valuable for you. The Burmese infantry bonus, giving them more attack, isn't really that valuable because infantry usually struggle more with survivability than damage output, but I think that's the issue across all ELO levels and not really an explanation for why they're particularly bad low level. The monks, on the other hand, is something that the Burmese wants to play into, but doesn't really jive that well with low ELO players that might struggle with the micro and would rather steer clear of the monks. Number 44, Britons. Now this is kind of funny, because Britons is on Hera's top 5 list of best civs for beginner players. He's not wrong that Britons is a good archer civ, but I think people overestimate the archers of the Britons a little bit. When you hear the pros talk about the Briton archers, it sounds like nothing can touch them. And for the pros, that's probably true. But for the average ELO player, it is not. The Briton archers are not invincible. They can still be walked down by skirms and slaughtered. And if your game plan with the Britons is to just make archers and warwolf trebs the whole game, you will probably lose. Number 44, the Chinese. If the last one was a surprise, this one probably was not. The Chinese kind of suffer from the Byzantine syndrome, but then with a difficult start on top of it. The start has become significantly easier over the last few patches, where you no longer have to deal with that house at 10 pop, and of course with the auto drop-off, but still, it's much more difficult than all other starts in the game. And then there are the later stages of the game where you don't really have any power units. There are no clear path to victory, and you need to use your discounts, in this case on the techs, to outlast and outsmart your opponent. This is difficult, and combined with the Chinese start, the Chinese is clearly the hardest civ in the game to master. So that's it. The bottom 5 civs in the 850 to 1000 ELO range. Just because this is what the stats say doesn't mean you have to agree that these are the hardest civs. If not, let me know below which civ you struggle the most with. Until next time, have a good one, and try to get some wins on the board for Burmese for me.
ကျမသွားနေပြီ